Okay, let's try and unpack this whole modern dating thing. It feels um, really complicated sometimes, right? Like you're just searching for some kind of map or, effective strategies.
Totally. And I think that's why this chat with Anna White from Off the Record felt so relevant. We really wanted to dig into her YouTube stuff
Mm.
because she's just got this uh, really sharp, kind of unfiltered view on dating and relationships.
Yeah, what really grabbed me was how she talks about the way successful men, like financially successful men, date differently. It's not just about money, it's a whole mindset.
Right.
And I think there are some surprising things there for, well, pretty much everyone, regardless of what you're looking for.
And the video, it really covers a lot of ground, dating apps, when to use them, maybe when not to, red flags, but how they're actually kind of subjective. And
Mm.
this whole concept that your type might actually be tied to your past trauma. She even gets into setting time boundaries, which is huge.
So our mission here really is to pull out the key insights from Anna's experience. Because she's not just like making this up, right? She's working with hundreds of women, seeing patterns.
Yeah, she has this whole statistics background too.
Exactly. So it's data-driven in a way. We want to give you, the listener, some genuinely useful takeaways, maybe some light bulb moments to help you figure out your own approach.
Yeah.
It's grounded in what she sees day to day.
And to really get where Anna's coming from, you kind of need to understand her background. It's not just, random opinions. It's built on some serious credentials.
Yeah, we're talking an Ivy League MBA, right?
Yeah.
An undergrad in statistics,
Mm.
plus managing like billion-dollar businesses. That's
Yeah.
not your typical dating coach resume.
Not at all. And you can see how that shapes her approach. I mean, working with 300, 400 women at once, that gives her a unique perspective, kind of her own data set, both qualitative and quantitative.
It's interesting, too, how she apparently got started, helping her own successful friends who had great careers, but their love lives weren't quite matching up.
Makes sense. Seeing that disconnect and thinking, okay, how can I apply some structure, some analysis to this?
Yeah. And she apparently has this history, like even back on the playground, she was helping the boys and girls talk to each other.
Yeah.
So maybe it's always been a thing for her.
Sounds like it. That knack for communication.
Okay, so let's talk about the dating landscape itself.
Yeah.
Because I hear it all the time. People feel like it's just gotten worse somehow, harder.
Yeah.
Does she speak to that?
Oh, absolutely. She totally acknowledges that feeling. Her view is, look, society's changed, gender dynamics, culture, technology, obviously. Plus, maybe we're all a bit more self-aware, which complicates things.
Mhm.
But fundamentally, she argues, people haven't changed that much in what they want.
So it's more the environment. The
Mm.
context we're dating in is just trickier.
Pretty much. Like, take technology. Dating apps give you this huge pool, right? Seems great, but it also means way more exposure to people you just don't click with.
More mismatches.
Exactly. And we tend to focus on the negative experiences, right? So those mismatches feel louder, making it seem like the overall quality is down. It's that paradox of choice problem.
Yeah, like a bigger pond, but maybe feels like more seaweed.
That's a good way to put it. And she also brings up the financial shifts, especially, she notes, for single Black women who statistically often earn more than single Black men. That changes things,
Right.
Who asks who out, who pays, the power balance. It's less tied to old rules.
Interesting. So with all these women she works with, what's the number one problem they bring her? Like the biggest hurdle?
Overwhelmingly, it's this feeling that there just aren't enough quality men out there. And quality, often gets boiled down to that very specific list.
Six figures, six pack, 6 feet tall guy.
And that's the one, the sort of mythical unicorn.
Yeah, it's almost a joke at this point. So what does Anna think about that list? Is it helpful? Realistic?
Not really. Her response is pretty blunt, actually. She basically says, your type is not your type.
Oh.
Yeah. She argues that what we think is our ideal is often, like, deeply connected to our past stuff. Unresolved emotional wounds, basically. Trauma.
Okay, your type is your trauma.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that because that's quite a statement. How does she see those past hurts shaping who we're attracted to now?
So the idea is, like, subconsciously, we might be drawn to partners who kind of mirror or trigger things from our past that we haven't fully dealt with. It's almost like trying to replay and fix old scenarios through new relationships.
Can you have some examples? How does that actually look in dating?
Sure. She mentions like women always drawn to much older men. She suggests that could link back to a father wound, maybe seeking validation or nurturing they didn't get, or women who go for guys others might see as a less conventionally attractive.
Yeah.
Maybe that connects to an abandonment wound, like a subconscious belief they're less likely to be left.
Wow, okay. I can see how those patterns could form without you even realizing it.
Definitely. She even talks about the good girl falling for the bad boy trope.
Yeah.
Her take is maybe that person hasn't explored their own, like, rebellious side, their shadow self, so they seek it out in a partner.
So the advice then is heal the trauma.
Mm.
And that might actually change who you're attracted to.
That's exactly it. Do the inner work, face those old wounds, and you might naturally start to find a wider range of people appealing. She even says, you might find you're actually really happy with a nerd type you'd have dismissed before. She really pushes this idea that your dream guy fantasy isn't necessarily the person who'd make the best husband or long-term partner for you.
That definitely connects to the whole idea of realistic standards, which you mentioned she talks about,
Hmm.
especially with dating apps feeding this idea of endless options.
Yeah, she really hits on those unrealistic expectations. That paradox of choice thing, again, you see so many profiles, it's easy to think, oh, this person's fine, but maybe someone perfect is next. So you just keep swiping past potentially good matches.
Right? Like online shopping for humans.
God.
Always looking for the next model.
Pretty much. And she contrasts that with how men sometimes, shoot their shot maybe more freely, while women often get told, oh, be realistic, lower your standards.
So what does she consider realistic then in today's world?
Well, her view is actually that women aren't settling as much anymore, which she sees as a good thing, even if it potentially feeds into that narrative about male loneliness. But ultimately, she thinks everyone, men and women, need to be doing their own self-improvement work to be ready for a good relationship.
And when we're making our own lists, our must-haves, what should we actually focus on?
She really pushes shifting from wants like must be funny, must love hiking, to fundamental relationship needs.
Needs light.
Like consistent attention, feeling truly cherished, unconditional love, feeling nurtured, having boundaries respected. That's the stuff that actually sustains a relationship long term. The wants, the specific traits, they're less crucial. She even suggests thinking about what you might have lacked from your parents.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, to identify what your core emotional needs really are in a partner now.
That's a powerful way to reframe it. Less checklist, more deep emotional requirements.
Exactly. And speaking of deep, that initial spark, the honeymoon phase, Anna's got a clear take on that versus what makes a connection last.
Right. She says that intense charisma, that initial buzz, it fades chemically within like 18 months.
Yep, biologically, that peak excitement starts to level off around then, which is why, relationships built only on that initial fire can kind of burn out around the 2-year mark if there's nothing else holding them together.
So if the fireworks don't last forever, what's the bedrock? What do you build on?
She talks about needing connection on 3 levels: physical, intellectual, and crucially, emotional. She observes that a lot of people, maybe especially if they grew up where feelings weren't really discussed, can be kind of emotionally stunted. And that can lead to leaning too hard on the physical or intellectual side because the emotional vulnerability feels uncomfortable or unskilled.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you're not comfy with vulnerability, you stick to what feels more concrete.
Right. And that leads right into how we ask for what we want. She has some really interesting ideas about using feminine versus masculine energy effectively.
Vulnerability seems key again here. She calls it a superpower for figuring out a partner's emotional capacity early on.
Totally. She really flips the script on vulnerability being weak, especially for women. She's like, no, being open about your feelings from the start lets you see how someone responds before you're deeply invested. It's data gathering.
So how does feminine energy fit into asking for what you need?
She describes feminine energy as leading with feelings, being about being, not doing. Masculine is more logic, strategy, action. So when asking for something, she advises saying how things make you feel rather than just telling a guy what to do.
Okay, give me an example, like in a real conversation.
Okay, she used one from coaching about wanting exclusivity. Instead of, I want us to be exclusive, which is very direct masculine energy, she suggests something like, I would feel really happy if we were in an exclusive relationship. See the difference? Leading with the feeling.
Ah, okay. Because that taps into that protective instinct she mentioned.
That's the idea. Your feelings act like a GPS for him to understand how to protect and cherish you. Sharing you feel sad or disappointed often works better than saying, you did X wrong. She also mentions problems if both partners are stuck in one energy type. The goal is healthy interdependence.
And how does this connect to dealing with, toxic masculinity?
Well, she suggests that women operating primarily in their masculine might unintentionally attract either hypertoxic masculine types or, maybe surprisingly, men who are more in a dominant feminine energy. She really encourages women to show up authentically on dates. Talk about 50% of the time, share vulnerabilities, don't play small, especially if you're successful.
That definitely goes against some old school advice about letting the man dominate the conversation.
Completely. It's about showing your full self. Now, she also dives into something a bit more controversial, this idea of knowing your market value in dating.
Ooh, okay. Market value. What does she mean by that? Sounds a bit transactional.
She admits it's kind of an unfortunate reality, but there's this element of social perception, like an economy, where how others perceive you plays a role, not just how you see yourself. And interestingly, she says women seen as conventionally beautiful often face surprising challenges.
Really? Why would that be? Seems like it would be easier.
Her theory is kind of like really attractive men often have tons of options, maybe less incentive to invest deeply right away.
Yeah.
And maybe men who feel they're punching up feel more grateful, potentially pushing for physical intimacy sooner without that deep emotional bond being built first.
Hmm.
So that initial attraction doesn't necessarily translate to staying power if the emotional connection isn't there. She talks about needing that homie lover friend foundation.
Okay, that makes a weird kind of sense. Like super high initial value might actually get in the way of building something real sometimes.
It's a fascinating perspective.
Yeah.
And it links to her thoughts on dating to marry versus just dating for fun.
Right. She thinks the outcome is different depending on your intention. How?
Yeah, she finds that women who are solely focused on marriage tend to experience more disappointment, more stop-start cycles. They put huge pressure on every date, like, is this the one? Which
Mhm.
leads to bigger letdowns when it's not. It's emotionally taxing.
So what's the alternative? That Olympic dating thing.
Exactly. She suggests having a roster like gold, silver, bronze medalists until someone steps up for real exclusivity. Her logic is until they commit, they aren't the one. It stops you pouring all your energy into multiple maybes.
Okay, that sounds very strategic. Do you tell people you're doing this?
She says be honest if asked directly. Something like, yes, I'm dating until I'm in an exclusive committed relationship. Her point is, a guy who's genuinely interested won't be scared off. Might even be motivated if they react badly. Maybe that's a red flag about control issues.
Speaking of red flags,
Mhm.
what's her take? Everyone's always looking for those.
You know, it's interesting. She doesn't focus heavily on universal external red flags. Because what's a deal breaker for one person might be fine for another, depending on their needs and feelings.
Wow.
So she puts the emphasis back on you. How does this person's behavior make you feel? Your job is to know your feelings and express them.
So it's less about judging them against a list, more about trusting your own internal compass.
Exactly. Self-awareness over external checklists.
Okay, what about gauging value then? A lot of people look at who pays on early dates as a big signifier.
She challenges that. She gets the history, especially maybe for women of color looking for signs of stability. But she doesn't think who pays for the first coffee is the best measure of long-term partner potential. She even notes how sometimes parents who were time poor might overcompensate with gifts.
So if focusing on who pays isn't the best way, what does she suggest for first dates? Big fancy dinners.
Nope. Actually, she's a big fan of coffee dates first. Lower pressure, easier to gauge real connection. She thinks it's harder for toxic or narcissistic types to keep up a facade in that casual setting. Plus, she says a lot of successful guys prefer coffee dates for initial due diligence anyway.
Due diligence.
Yeah, her advice is look at the pattern of investment over time, not just who bought the first latte.
Right. Consistency in how things build. Got it. She also talks about the myth of potential, right? Dating someone for who they could be.
Oh, yeah, she's very clear on this. Don't do it. Her analogy is like buying something from a thrift store marked as is. Potential is mostly your projection of what you want them to be, not who they are now.
Mm.
It's unfair to both of you, basically. You're missing who they actually are right now.
Accept them as is, not as a fixer-upper project.
Exactly. Which kind of leads into another big topic she covers, especially for her clients, dating outside your race.
She encourages that. What's the thinking there?
Well, she points out, statistically, if you limit yourself to only one race, especially, say, for Black women seeking Black men with specific income or education levels, the numbers just shrink your pool dramatically. So she advises being open to everyone. She says it can increase your chances of finding love by like 7 times.
What about worries about cultural differences, shared experiences, that sort of thing.
She acknowledges those are real, but argues that today, with technology, and if both people are open-minded and curious, those gaps can usually be bridged. It takes effort, but it's possible. And interestingly, she notes that even when her clients date widely, about half still end up finding great relationships with Black men.
So it's about widening the net, not prescribing an outcome. She also mentions navigating negativity within communities like colorism, texturism.
Yeah, she recognizes those are painful realities and suggests that sometimes dating outside your race can mean encountering different preference sets where you might feel more seen or appreciated away from those specific internal biases.
Okay, let's get practical. Dating apps. She has specific strategies even down to the time of year.
She does. Super specific. Avoid apps in December. She thinks quality people are busy with holidays and work. But January, that's the Super Bowl of dating. Best time to pay for apps, lots of New Year resolution energy.
Huh, okay, the dating Super Bowl.
Yeah. And expand your radius, especially in big states. Maybe even change your listed city temporarily within, say, Texas to see new people. She does warn, though, based on her experience, California can be a particularly tough, sometimes racist dating scene for Black women.
Wow, okay. That's very direct. What about the profile itself? The bio, the pics?
Yep. Key tips include at least one black and white photo. Apparently they get more clicks. Always smile with teeth. No sunglasses in the main pics. Dress code.
Hmm,
More clothing than skin if you want serious connection. For prompts, don't just say what you like, explain why.
gives more personality.
Exactly. And end prompts with questions to make it easy for someone to start chatting. Maybe subtly hint at the kinds of dates or places you like.
Basically make it easy for them to engage and plan. Got it. So how do you become irresistible, according to Anna? What's the secret?
It might sound counterintuitive, but she says, become self-centered.
Mm-hmm.
Even a little selfish. Which, yeah, goes against how many women are raised.
Okay, how does that work?
Her whole thing is you become irresistible to others when you're truly irresistible to yourself. When you genuinely love yourself, that radiates, that attracts people. You gotta love you first, she says, before someone else can love you deeply.
Self-love as the ultimate attraction magnet. That's powerful. She also lays out some key dating timelines, right? Like being the CEO of your love life.
Yeah, pretty clear benchmarks. Match online or meet someone. They should ask you out within a week. Started dating. Aim for consistent weekly dates. Exclusivity conversation. Should happen within about 3 months. Big delays are a potential flag.
And long-term.
Engagement or marriage proposal within 2 years. Her take is men usually know within 6 months if they see long-term potential. Moving in together. She notes that timeline varies culturally before or after marriage.
Those are quite specific. It encourages being proactive, not letting things drift. So if people are listening and thinking, wow, I connect with this, how could they potentially work with her?
She has an application on her site, then a consultation call. It's about finding the right fit. She's clear not everyone's ready for coaching, might suggest therapy first. Coachability is key, being open to trying new things.
Did she talk about success rates?
She mentions good outcomes for her VIP and Get You Club clients. Yeah, a high percentage finding relationships. And the support doesn't just stop when you find someone. It often goes into the relationship, even marriage. She apparently attends a few client weddings a year, which is pretty cool.
Sounds very involved. So what's the ultimate goal for her, would you say? What drives her?
She really stresses it's not just about getting clients into a relationship, it's about their growth, helping them become the woman who's ready for the best relationship possible for them. It's the transformation journey she seems most passionate about. And you definitely get a sense she genuinely cares about Black and brown women navigating dating in a healthy way.
Okay, so if we boil down this whole deep dive into Anna White's approach, what's the main takeaway?
I think it's really about taking control. Being the CEO, like you said, you're in the driver's seat of your dating life. And maybe take a moment, reflect on what we talked about. What really hit home for you, for your own situation or goals?
Yeah, and maybe a final thought to chew on. What if you consciously decided to reframe your type? Or tried that more strategic Olympic dating idea? How might that actually change your experiences, your outcomes? Really think about that power of self-awareness and setting your own timelines.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for diving deep with us into Anna's insights today. It's definitely thought-provoking stuff to explore in your own life.